Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Shook.
Hello. Let's see. Can you hear me, first of all? Yes? Yes, sir. Not great. If I yell, it's better? There's some echo back up here if I yell. What about over there in the corner? Can you hear me okay? Loud and clear? All right. Well, thanks for joining this the last couple of days. It has been a lot of fun, to be sure. And you know what I just did? I'm not exactly all together here. I left the clicker in the back. Let's click it. So what I thought we would do now is kind of wrap up a little bit with some broad discussion about what the heck we're doing here and what we even mean when we see coaching and we talk about coaching and lean coaching. Now that you've been here a day and a half, almost 2 days, perhaps you have some better idea of that. But one of the things we can agree on is that it's a very important thing. But exactly what we mean by lean coaching versus other kinds of coaching is something I think that is a work in progress. And that's the reason we decided to convene this first time last December, and now the second time. So let's just explore a little bit about what we mean and what coaching is all about. First of all, it's this common word. We met a great coach this morning, Hank Bias. And to coach as a verb means to give instruction or give advice, right? To instruct. And it's as a noun, it's a person, as all of us are, who trains. It could train an athlete, it could train a team, provides training. Teach is almost the same set of words, right? To say, impart knowledge, impart a skill, to give instruction. So this word instruct keeps coming up. So what does instruct mean as a verb? It means to furnish with knowledge, especially a systematic method to teach, to train, to educate. And another word that I think goes with these very often is mentor. So the book that I wrote, Managing to Learn, is meant to be kind of a story, a mentoring story, essentially. And mentor is a wise and trusted counselor or teacher, an influential senior, sponsor, or supporter. So that's something about what coaching is in general. And what is a coach? I'm going to borrow from our good friends at Be Like Coach, who we respect so much. That coaches help others to learn, compete, and succeed. And further, effective coaching is good teaching. So they're equating coaching and teaching. We use these words in different settings, but they're equating the two. And I think there are a lot of different types of coaching and coaches that we encounter, right? We have sports coaches, executive coaches, business coaches, life coaches now. I am told there's something called a Twitter coach. I need a Twitter coach if I'm ever going to Twitter. I've never Twittered, so I would need a coach in that. So you add all these up, and which one are we talking about? Well, I don't know. Life coaching, sports coaching, executive coaching, teaching, mentoring, instructing, helping, training, leading. And I think there's this discipline of lean coaching that we need to explore and develop further. And that's happening. So out there in the lean world, you have a lot of disparate activities and kind of mini movements taking place as people are working on different ways to approach doing good coaching in terms of providing lean knowledge, lean skills to the people who need it. The TWI, with a 60-year or so history, and many people taking that much further, such as our friends from IBM, who we're very pleased are with us again this time. ICF, I think that's International Coaching Federation. So there's a body, and there are others, I believe, who provide actual certification in a style of coaching. They have a very specific definition of what they mean by coaching. They would not necessarily include some of these other ways of going about coaching. A couple of specific ones in the lean world. There's the Kata coaching, and Mike, who wrote the book Toyota Kata, was here with us earlier, as you know. And then Harada, the Harada method. I don't know if you've heard of that, but Norm Bodek, someone who founded the Productivity Inc., the book that's produced so many books about lean, going back over 30 years ago. He's introducing something called Harada coaching. Found someone in Japan named Harada who provides a very specific way of going about coaching. Shine style, that means Ed Shine is a professor from MIT who wrote a book that influenced many of us, a book called Helping, where he lays out different kinds of questions to use in different situations. Continuous improvement coaching. Again, many of us, I think, came out of that world. And problem-solving coaching, how to actually coach someone through a problem-solved situation. A3 coaching, using the process Tracy, I think, worked with people on yesterday, and is, again, in the book that we have called Managing to Learn, how to use that process as a way to develop others. And then there's this kind of Toyota production system sensei. All these legends about the Japanese sensei who would come in and teach using sometimes very unconventional methods, to be sure. All this, I think, informing a model of lean coaching. And however we ultimately define what lean coaching is, it's going to be something that enables leaders to fulfill their responsibilities, their two primary responsibilities, which is to get the job done, to get the goal accomplished, whatever that goal is. If it's a sports team, to improve the team so that we can be competitive and win the game, win the championship. Or if we work, we have specific work objectives that we need to accomplish. So that has to happen. At the same time, we want to develop our people. How we can both get the job done and develop our people, that's the responsibilities of a lean leader, and that's the service to which we want to bring in a lean coaching model. Two of the big influences that we look to as we develop this, and they came up numerous times over the last day and a half, Taiichi Ono, the person who developed the Toyota production system at Toyota, John Wooden, many years apart, half a world apart, working in completely different endeavors, but going about their challenges in very similar ways, it turns out, and finding similar inspiration and using, as it turns out, to the surprise of many of us, the exact same words to describe what they thought it meant to be a coach, to be a mentor, to be a teacher, which is that you haven't taught until they have learned. Until you achieve that objective, you haven't taught. You haven't fulfilled your role as a coach. So for me, and I think for many of us, as I look to those two as kind of exemplars, I ask the question, can I be a master teacher like Ono or Coach Wooden? Ono's book, The Toyota Production System, from about, late 1980s is when that was available in English, from Productivity Press, that I mentioned earlier. And then You Haven't Taught Until They Have Learned, the book about Coach Wooden. And if I think about how to be a master teacher like Wooden or Ono Sensei, I think about a continuum like this. We talked about it generally earlier today when I was up here with Mike, what he was contributing. I think there's a place for very targeted instruction, and there's also a place for much more open counsel, depending on the situation. And if we can understand how to assess those situations to know when it's appropriate to use which, and then we can assess our own ability in terms of being able to provide each of those kinds of coaching, I think that's how we can become a master teacher. So let's explore that just a little bit. What you see here is a simple, this is a simple matrix I'm going to show that you can plot yourself on. In fact, I'll suggest that you do that. If you have a piece of paper and a pencil with you, you could simply draw this. It's got two axes, vertical and horizontal. And I think a coaching situation, just like any problem-solving situation, begins with grasping the situation. And I think that is the most challenging task that we find, either as a coach or as a lean implementer or as a leader in any situation. So what you see here is on the vertical axis, you see from novice to expert. Someone who doesn't know how to drive, someone who doesn't know how to twirl the pencil, someone doesn't know how to do their standardized work. So we have to assess the learner from novice to expert. But also along the bottom, we have to assess the situation, how complex it is, how difficult it is. Assess the challenge from simple to complex. And it's nice, sometimes we'll find both of those down in the lower left-hand corner. It's a simple situation, and you have a novice, and so we can begin from there, teaching truly from the most basic steps. So I think there's maybe an overlap between coaching and instructing that you can see over there on your right-hand side. So to assess the problem situation, you need deep problem-solving skills. So before I can be a coach, I need to have problem-solving skills myself, I think. To assess the learner, I actually need to be able to do that. I need to be able to understand the kind of skills they need versus the skills that I see that they currently possess. Then I can have a continuum that moves up from the targeted instruction zone all the way up through open coaching. What is often especially challenging and even confusing is when you have someone who's a novice, but they're in a very complex situation. Now, we would like in a perfect world for that not to ever be the case. But as many of us face our situations day to day, I bet you often see this. You see someone in a very difficult situation, and they really shouldn't be working there, but they are. And so you have to find a way to help them. All right. So here's where I think you can use this as a worksheet. Just right now. Just take maybe even 1 minute. It's just for your own use. To plot yourself in a coaching situation. It could be one that you faced last week. It could be one that you face regularly, one that you expect to face. Plot an X where you see the need of the situation, assessing both the learner and the problem. So a very complex problem, I'm going to be way off here to your right. And an expert, I'm going to be way up there at the top. I'll put an X there. And you can imagine different situations that you face. So you probably coach a lot of people, right? And you could find different situations all over the map there, right? Then with a circle, assess your response. Maybe either what you did when you faced that a week ago or last month, or as you look ahead to a situation that you see coming, or one that you're facing regularly now, where your ability is. Assess your own ability. So if they happen to match up perfectly, you'll have an X and a circle around it. But I often find what it is that they don't match up as perfectly as I would wish. That I can see that the learner needs perhaps more targeted instruction regarding the specific skills that they need. Twirling the pencil. And I'm not able to provide that. Other times, they may be dealing with a situation that's so complex, they truly need deep analytical knowledge of their situation that I'm not able to provide so well. So if we can start to develop an assessment tool like this, we could start to develop a model so we can recognize that as lean coaches, we could be able to be effective in any of these situations, in any situation. I think this is the goal. I think it's the goal that we all have. It's the one that I have myself. And as I have asked people to do this, it's occasionally you will have the X and the O exactly around it, right? And when the world is nice and tidy like that, it's a good thing. But often it's not. So then this becomes a means by which we can set targets for ourselves as coaches, how we need to develop ourselves. So then I can think, how can I be a better teacher, a master teacher like Coach Wooden or Ono Sensei? I thought I'd share a little bit more about some reading that I've done recently that relates to this, and you might find it insightful as you think about how to develop your different types of coaching skills, your skills as an instructor and as a more open coach. How many of you have heard of this book or read this book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman? Only a couple of hands going up. So you've actually read it, I think. Your hand went way up, so probably read it. And only a couple of hands went up. You've heard of it. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's one of those big books. It's about this thick, 500 pages. It's pretty hard. It's pretty tough going. I had to read it a couple of times to get it myself. But I'll just break down a couple of things that are in it that I think maybe can be helpful to us as we think about how we need to develop ourselves as coaches. What Kahneman, so Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winning, he's a psychologist, and he got a Nobel Prize in a lot of the work that he did around economic psychology, how people make decisions for economic decisions. It turns out we don't always use logic to make our decisions. Surprise, surprise. And so 30 plus years of research has led him to the book that he wrote, and to conclude that humans' brains work in two fundamentally different ways. We have two systems. We have a system, what he calls a system 1 and a system 2. And system 1 is very fast, and system 2 is very slow. What that means is system 1 jumps to conclusions. One of the things that we've said about lean for years is one of the important things about lean is it is not jumping to conclusions. It's assessing the situation and deciding based upon understanding cause what our action should be. Well, it turns out most of what we do as humans, moment to moment, we're using system 1. We're not putting a lot of deep thought in the small decisions that we make. System 1 jumps to conclusions, and it does so for very good reasons. Because as we evolved and we were being attacked by as a survival mechanism, you don't have to think when something is coming at you and you're in danger. And in fact, System 1 can't handle doubt at all. It seeks facts, data, and stories that confirm what it already believes. So I think if we think about our careers, we know this happens all the time, right? People we work with are always looking for the facts that confirm what they already thought they knew or what they want to believe, right? Turns out there's a natural mechanism, there's a reason that our brains do this. I'm going to bring this back to us as lean coaches here in a minute, so stick with me. It seems that there's a problem with the problem solving that we bring to bear in our day-to-day work. And this is one of the things that as lean coaches we always work on. How can I be a good problem solver? How can I approach each situation with good problem solving thinking? Well, evidence tells us that there seems to be a natural tendency just not to do that, that we perceive a problem and we get these impressions and make assumptions and we jump over to a solution. And Mike mentioned that today as well, right? When he mentioned that we find solutions we want to implement. So a solution mentality, a solution implementation mentality instead of a problem finding mentality, right? So we kind of jump over the facts. Maybe it's a natural human tendency. For years I said it wasn't. I thought this was just something that we kind of developed ourselves to do in companies because companies are trying to go so fast and make decisions so quickly. But it turns out, I guess there is a natural tendency for us to do this. We do it all the time without realizing it. So you can look at just that much information and you can fill in the rest, right? You know what that says. And the thing is, sometimes you make mistakes, right? So you kind of have to watch it. So that's why in our lean thinking, whether you're doing stuff on the plant floor, whether we're using our A3s, whatever our process may be, we're trying to say, how can we solve problems and innovate more effectively? How can we ask questions to help ourselves see better? So a lot of lean questioning that we practice here in this venue help us to do this, asking what's really happening, what's the actual situation, not based on hearsay. Asking, what do I actually know? Understand the real problem, know the facts, verify those to move toward a solution that's based on a real hypothesis that we can measure. So this is what we want to do. And ultimately, almost all our lean tools are simply means of doing this. There are different ways of accomplishing this, right? So back to the System 1, System 2. System 1 is a machine for jumping to conclusions, is the way Kahneman puts it. And System 2 handles uncertainty and questions hypotheses. So if I see a speed limit sign that says speed limit 55, right, I don't have to think about it. I know what that is. If I look at an equation like that, I have to kick into System 2. And guess what? We're lazy, so we don't like to use System 2. It hurts. Some people don't mind as much as others, but it requires energy. It's a very completely different thought process that takes place. System 1 jumps to conclusions. System 2 handles uncertainty and questions hypotheses, and we need both to survive and evolve, okay? So it's still speaking, still speaking the words of the psychologist Kahneman. You need both. Well, okay, but when and how to switch? And if we think of how we want to make progress in companies and what our role as a coach may be, I think there's some hints here that could be very useful for us. Here's an idea that essentially kata can be seen as a means of tapping into System 1 and directing it for maximum effectiveness. So a job that I might do in a factory or anything that I do physically, I don't want to be thinking every time I have to decide to pick up the paper cup, to put the sleeve on it, put the coffee inside, to install the cup holder into the car, to insert the IV. I need all that to become second nature, right? So I don't have to think about it. So I free myself up to think about other things. So the better we can design our work as a good kata, the better we can really effectively use System 1. The A3 then is a means of tapping into System 2 and directing it for maximum effectiveness. The A3 is where we step back, take a deep breath, right? Stop, look at the sheet of paper, look at the situation, and try to think it through very methodically, understanding the root cause, do that analysis, right? Come up with some alternatives of what to approach. So one of the things that continually amazes me about lean stuff is that a lot of the tools and techniques that have been developed now for decades, they were developed without reading any of this kind of stuff, right? But it turns out there's tremendous resonance in how humans actually think. It's amazing to me. So it's astounding. And also, it's also reinforcing that the things we've been doing actually make sense and work for very good and very deep reasons. So we could also think in terms of needing a switching mechanism, because we will typically stay in System 1 if we can, right? Just because it's too hard to switch over and start thinking deeply. So a switching mechanism helps. So in fact, with the A3, that's the way we use it, right? You start writing an A3 and you make sure that you capture the current conditions first before going on to determining what would be a solution to propose. We're going to stop ourselves from jumping to conclusions. We're going to use the kata then as we learn more and more about how each activity should be organized, standardized work, put as much as we can into that, and then leaving more and more space for us to be able to think about creative new solutions. So this is an idea. So the way we make decisions, a little bit more about what Kahneman shares with us about the way we think and how it fits with what we do as lean coaches. Most of our decisions are based on fast, plausible storytelling. And that, again, is a System 1 feature, rather than slow analytic reasoning. In order to understand the past or deal with the present or know the future, people tell stories. We tell them to each other, we tell them internally to ourselves. And stories oversimplify and downplay things like luck and randomness. The mind can't handle that. So it creates order and coherence whether it's really there or not. And this is how, in companies, we're making decisions all the time. That's what a story is. It creates order and coherence, whether it's really there or not. So here's a simple story, a question actually, to illustrate that. So System 1 prefers what sounds plausible rather than what's probable. So let me read this little story for you. Linda is 31 years old. She's single, bright. She majored in philosophy. She cares about social injustice. She participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Now, question. Is Linda more likely to be a bank teller or a bank teller and a feminist? Who says bank teller and a feminist? Hands up. Come on. Who says bank teller? Okay, that's very interesting. So that's pretty much exactly what Kahneman finds. Well, he's given this question to thousands of people. So here's the thing. When you think about it, the story tells you that you want to believe Linda is a feminist, so you choose that. But now just turn this into some variables. That doesn't make any sense at all, right? You got the same variable in A and B, a bank teller. Now you've added one more into B. So it's impossible for B to be more likely, as the question says, than A. And that's okay, right? It's when you see that, it's like, oh, of course. But most people will look at it, and the story just feels so coherent and compelling that you choose B. So we think about it, man, at work, we're making decisions based on stuff like this all day, every day. So How can we take the things we really know to be true, put those into a good kata? How can we step aside then and use our A3 to stop us from jumping to conclusions when we shouldn't, and using System 2, because System 2 is what really makes us intelligent humans. It's really System 2, so we want to use it more. So you look at the social technical job design of a good old Toyota or any other assembly line. So kata is design of experience, right? Everybody knows about design of experiment, right? Out of DO, design for Six Sigma and all that. Well, think of design of experience. And that's what kata is. So the way we're doing work, try to put as much as you can so that the worker doesn't have to think about those things that should be automatic. Frees that worker up to think about other things, to problem solve and think of improvements. The A3 process then is for deep think learning, right? Those times where you got to sit down and think about a difficult problem and get a headache, smoke comes out your ears, you start burning up all those neurons and all those kinds of things start happening, right? You need both of those. And that's what the A3 is for. We need both of those. And then we're going to use the A3 specifically then as a means of coaching and mentoring. As you, let's say you were a coachee and I was a coach, and you're going to take your thinking and you're going to put it on an A3 piece of paper. You're going to be thinking deeply using your System 2. Then you're going to be coming to me, and I'm going to be able to see your thinking right there written down in front of me and ask effective questions around it. Going back to the example of where we're doing a well-designed kata, standardized work on the plant floor, the same thing. The worker's doing this work, I can go out there and look at that as a coach, and we can be going through coaching cycles and understanding the kind of improvements that you're bringing to bear. So a lot of these tools that we've used over the years in Lean, turns out have a lot of deep underpinnings that can be proven now with a lot of psychological research. And I think that helps us as we start thinking about developing a model of Lean coaching. It's going to be situational, because the situations that we face are highly diverse. And I think you saw the graphic here that's in the middle. I think Jim showed that earlier, yesterday, where you see the current conditions as we understand them, and you have a target condition we know we want to get to, and you have this uncertain zone in the middle that you're going to have to do PDCA to work yourself through. And then the entire thing is also a matter of understanding plan, do, check, act as a means of both informing our thinking and our acting as well. And with that, I think appropriately on this slide, I'd like to ask my colleague Jim Hunsinger to come back up. And as we are here to simply explore how can we be better teachers, whether we want to be like Taiichi Ohno or John Wooden doesn't even matter, right? Whether we use something we call a kata or something we call an A3 doesn't matter. We want to be better teachers, like Hank Bias, right? And we want to be able to share the learning that we gather along that to develop a true model of Lean coaching as we go forward. So for my final shared thoughts, I mean, that's basically it, Jim. So I think now we wanted to kind of thank everyone for coming and get any feedback now and talk about next steps.
And thank John.
Thank you. Are you on?
Am I on now? Okay, I'm on with this.
Stand by with the handheld. There you go.
Yeah, I can't remember just. Okay, there I'm on now. So if anybody'd like to ask any questions.
Questions, comments, thoughts. Do you want to do this again?
Yeah.
We did it in early December. It's only 6 months ago.
Yeah, 7.
7. That's right. The people who were doing all the hard work to put it together know it was only 7 months. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that, everyone. And I see this as something that's a little bit exploratory, as opposed to come here, we're going to tell you exactly what Lean coaching is. It's something we're going to do together based on a kind of collective experience.
Yeah, and an important part of that development is obviously feedback and information from those who are out here practicing this and trying to deploy it in their organizations, which are you folks.
Yes. Sometimes, Jim, asking for questions is kind of hard. Maybe what's on your mind? What's on your mind? Been here a day and a half. That's me again. Damn. Darn it. I messed up twice. Not even counting all the flight mistakes I made yesterday.
All right.
This week is to ask a lot of questions, open-end questions, things of that nature. If you're not used to doing this, and that's how you're treated when you are trying to present maybe problem solving or continuous improvement, and you have a coach who's working with you, one of the things I've experienced is you get 9 minutes of questions and 5 seconds of coaching. So what is a good breakdown of how much you question someone and how much you coach someone?
Actually, I'd be really interested if anyone else had some ideas about that, because we have a room full of various. I have some thoughts, and I'm not going to. But who might have some thoughts about that? I know people here have encountered that before. If no one raises their hand, I'm going to point to.
Yeah, we got a couple mics floating around here, so.
Whitney saw me looking at her. She's trying to hide under the table now. Laura's saying.
Hi, so to answer your question from our experience, so within IBM, I think there's a balance. And actually our session, we just got done, it was partially on that, which is coaching, I think, is an opportunity. It's two opportunities. It's to increase integrity of the tools that you're using and improve the process of what problem you're trying to solve, and develop people at the same time. So there's a balance. So when you coach, I think you pick some important aspects and you coach on those pieces, and then you follow up and do a little bit at a time. So you certainly, there's a delicate balance between doing too much too soon, and especially if it's in a public setting.
Yeah, so coaching becomes a bit of a skill, right? You can do it in a way that really puts people off, especially if it's in front of others. And anybody else back there now? I'm looking at Judy. I'm looking at Whitney. Well, one of the things I noticed in the question, you distinguish between questioning and coaching. Anybody notice that? So what do you think about that? Yeah, elaborate on that a little bit.
Oh no, that's all I was going to say.
Say it with the microphone now.
But, so the questioning is what stimulates the thinking that you're trying to get that person to do. So it's a Socratic method. You're more likely to learn if you're forced to get from A to B on your own, with your own brain, rather than being told how to get from A to B. But I think the art that you just mentioned, that there's a skill to it, the art is knowing when is the question going to shut them down with frustration because they honestly cannot see how to get to B, and when is it the right time to ask the question so that they can actually get there on their own. So it's a lot like your graph over there, knowing when are we being confronted with a simple problem or a complex problem, and where are they on their ability to get there on their own.
So one thought is you're questioning the distinction between questioning and coaching, but also thinking in terms of the fact that there are situations that that call for both. I think that is one of the things I'm trying to show with this graphic. It's not perfect yet, right? I think you can help me improve this, but that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. There is a place for targeted instruction. Here's how you do that, right? It can be very that specific, or maybe a little less so. And then there's a place for, Socratic. And there's a place for just open-ended questions where you don't know the answer yourself as well. And here's another hand over here. And I'm gonna keep coming back to your good question. But yes.
So after your question, Earl had a question as well. Do you want to let him go first, or do you want to go? Okay.
It just strikes me, I'm a professional coach, so coming here, I've come to learn about lean and to learn about the connection between lean and lean coaching. And one of the things that I've noticed as I listened to the different philosophies that have been shared with us, Mr. Wooden's, Mr. Ono's, is that there's an intention behind lean that these gentlemen brought to their coaching, which was a focus on the growth, development, and learning of the individual. And that intention really can inform what I'm seeing you share here, Mr. Shuka, in terms of it's situational. There's a moment when we're going to be a coach coaching, and there's a moment where we might be a teacher with a coach approach. So it doesn't mean we can't use the skills of questioning or attentive listening that Judy was sharing yesterday. It's we're on a sliding scale. So we can use questions in lean, and I'm learning lean now, so we can use questions in lean, and that brings a coach approach to the intention is what I'm seeing. And then the degree to which we are really a coach coaching on the spectrum, which I'm equating to your open coaching zone, is the place where you just said the perfect thing. I ask a question, and as the coach, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't have an answer. I'm truly interested in what that other person has to offer up.
Excellent.
That's what I'm hearing here.
Excellent. One of the reasons we wanted to do this, again, now the second time, was to put some of these worlds together. As I go around through the lean world, there are a lot of people when they say coaching mean this one kind of thing. And then there are other people that mean something very different by it. And so I want us to kind of get together to be more explicit and to define that better. So very, very nicely stated. Thank you. And Earl, did you add?
John, I just wanted to respond to the question you'd asked originally at the beginning of this. In my career, I've participated in dozens of conferences, and setting aside my own presentation this morning, my observation for you would be that I had the privilege of sitting in a number of other sessions this last 2 days, and I think this is probably as relevant as any conference I've been at for what the presenters said to what the participants we're experiencing. So I put this at the top. You should continue to do this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Earl. And your participation in this means everything to us. But also meeting people like I was the previous commenter, that you're a professional coach. Sorry, I'd like to meet you afterwards. But and you're learning about lean, and so I think putting these together is an important thing. So does that partly speak to yours? I just want to say maybe one more thing. That sometimes, again, so the art of being a good questioner, and I'm still working on it, myself. I think I had the good fortune of being taught by some just masterful questioners. I sometimes tell the story of a boss of mine. His name was Mr. Cho, C-H-O. Just retired finally as the chairman of Toyota in Japan last month. I'm glad to say. I'm glad that he finally got off that roller coaster. But I had a chance to work with him and see him manage large numbers of people in Japan back in the 1980s. I worked for Toyota in Japan in the 1980s. He was a general manager in charge of several hundred people. Then he was the president of the Toyota Georgetown plant, Kentucky, as it opened up for the first 8 years. He was my boss the last job I had with Toyota, opening the Toyota Supplier Support Center. And I still see him every couple of years. I went to see him just before I took this job with LEI, just to report what I'm going to do next. In all of what I've seen him do, I never once saw him tell anyone, give an exact answer of what to do. He was so good with his questions, he could always put himself in the position of whoever it was that was struggling. Think back to when he learned that lesson and give a question that would make them think of their next step beautifully. So they didn't feel like, but a lot of people, when we try to do that, like in my own case sometimes, the person being questioned feels like they're just getting the runaround. They're getting 20 questions, and you start to feel, as Laura said, it's the kind of thing you may not want to do, in public. But I think that's often when we get confused in terms of what problem we as the coach are trying to solve. If I get wrapped up in trying to solve his or her problem, then that's what can happen. That is, I'm sitting here, obviously, my coach here, knows the answer, and they're just not telling me. Well, that sucks. That doesn't feel good. If this is what you want me to do, well, just tell me what to do. The thing is, as a coach, we shouldn't get wrapped up in thinking that our job is to solve their problem. Our problem is the fact that they don't see the same way forward that you do. So the very problem that I have as a coach is not the same one that they have. So I've got to keep myself out of the mindset of trying to solve their problem for them. And if I do that, I can ask questions that effectively help them move forward. So then I think, as the other woman in the middle mentioned, the questioning is effective coaching then, I think, at the same time. But this is a great topic that I really wanted us to be able to discuss as a full group. I think the more we can define it, the better off we will all be.
I'd like to add something to
Yes,
that too.
of course.
I'm going to add this in summary of kind of what I'm hearing you say, answering the question even you say, is I think part of it is essentially part of the answer is the practice. I mean, obviously you're trying to help these people through, coaching through, get them to practice. Part of learning how to coach is to practice the coaching itself, and certainly starting out very deliberately with some of these things on the open-ended questions, because that is, when you're not used to it in particular, that's very difficult to do. But be very deliberate about it in developing yourself on how to assess the situation from a coaching perspective to help them out. And it's just like anything, just like the whole kata thing and that behavior thing we were talking about earlier. The more times you practice it, the easier it'll get, the quicker you'll be able to assess the situation and deliver better questions and better coaching. So certainly be very deliberate about it starting out.
I think being deliberate is an important part of what we're talking about. Yes, Whitney.
And I think beyond being deliberate, being really transparent about that, especially if it's something that's new and you're just starting that, it really makes you feel defensive when you answer a question and your leader, your manager responds with a question. It's like, do you not trust me anymore? What did I do wrong? What's the hole in this? Where I think being really transparent about this is the way we're going to try to, I'm trying to coach you. So we're going to change the way that we work together, and I'm going to ask you questions. And being not just deliberate, but transparent about that as well, I think really helps as you're making that transition, because most of us aren't used to working that way, and it is a little shocking, and you do get a little defensive when it first happens. So I think that's another piece of that.
I think that's great advice. I've given that advice myself, and but sometimes I forget, and I'll notice it after the fact. But remembering to do that, and there's where a community of us working together, we can reinforce that kind of advice for each other. Because when you do forget, you often regret it. Being transparent is an important part. I think there was a question.
Hi, for a company that believes in this, wants to implement it with all their management team, what implementations have you seen that have been very effective? Coaching frontline supervisors, team leaders, the whole department, because eventually you got to train this, and then everybody's going after it. Just, we're at this point where it makes complete sense. We've been doing lean for 7 years. We've been telling everybody what to do or why it's important, but just not effectively developing them along the way. Just your feedback on there.
Okay. Jim, you want? TWI.
Go ahead and start it off. What's that?
TWI.
Oh, yeah. I guess from a framework and methodology and process, TWI is certainly one way to build that, because it's so foundational. From several reasons. Because one, it builds the base skill set through the process of TWI, be it JI, JM, and all that. Again, thinking back to we showed earlier, essentially that scientific method, which is kind of this questioning, deliberate questioning, analytical process to get that basic skill set, which goes back to what they talk about with Wooden. Is he would try to work on his players to develop the base skills, dribbling, passing, and so forth. So that became so routine that they didn't think about it. Part of the reason behind that was so once they got those patterns of behavior that were routine, they didn't have to think about it. It freed up their mind for the more complex problems or situations they'd run into. It could be very similar with trying to develop people like that. Like I said, TWI is a way to do that. Get people so this is a natural behavior that they do, and it helps them free them up so they can deal with more complex problems and situations.
It is part of that. There's actually a program way to go about it. So there's a good 60 years of experience about how to do exactly what you're talking about. In terms of those dynamics that Jim was just talking about, and we've talked about here a lot today. Then how then do you have a way that you can institutionalize that in a large organization? So there's a body of knowledge there. Yeah. But one of the things that one of the things that's great about coming together like this is you can see different examples, because again, I'm a believer in this situational thing. Every case is different.
Yeah. And I'd say it depends. It always depends where it's situational.
It depends, and then we want to go as far as to say it depends on what. And there's where if you can actually talk with some folks and companies that have dealt with it. I love the Starbucks example, honestly, because they took what was the basic structure, some basic fundamental knowledge that Jim just described from 60 years ago, and then they brought that into a current modern day setting, but not only then for individuals of how you work with the barista, right, but also then how you would roll that out to a very complex organization, how you would do exactly what you're talking about, because you've been at it for 7 years. Obviously a lot of deep learning has happened, but how can you get that implanted more broadly throughout the organization is the challenge that you face now. So I think there is a lot of a body of knowledge around TWI. There's some companies, IBM here as well, who have learned these things.
IBM is here, and I don't know if Denny Hall's still here. He had to leave already, but he's certainly, so if you ask any one of them, you'll hear a couple things. You'll hear some things that are similar, but you'll all hear some things that are very different because their situation and needs were different. So that's what it is, probably gathering some of that body of knowledge and then using it to develop what are your needs, and what do you need to do. And I think you'd hear out of every single one of them or other ones that, like the TWI Summit, is all of them went through some level of start and stops, going through that learning process on trying to figure out how does it work in their situation. And the successful ones were the ones that, even when they ran into problems, that didn't give up, were persistent with it.
So in the same way it's kind of situational with individuals, institutionally it is as well. And I think with that, what we want to do is say thank you for coming this year. Please join us next time, and let's find ways to stay in touch so we can share learning and make this a community of learning together. Thank you for joining us.